In the years following the Second Vatican Council, the Catholic Church was to undergo many changes. This fresh new vision of the Church and the centrality of the Paschal Mystery changed the way many looked at their missions. One of the results of that thinking was Teens Encounter Christ, a 3-day retreat experience aimed at high school seniors. TEC retreats are now found all over the United States and beyond, helping to shape the lives of our youth and young adults. But like so many things in our faith, its origins are humble.
I was a young priest, ordained about 4 or 5 years. And in those days, the young priest in a parish was usually considered the youth minister, that he was going to take care of, especially if there was a high school in the parish, that's where he would do his ministry. So most Catholic high schools had at least once a year a retreat. And they used the model of the parish mission, where you'd hire a preacher, a missionary, to come in from outside, and in the parish they'd have it, every night, sometimes during the day for the elder folks, and at night the man would preach to a full church. So we'd bring in an outside preacher into the school, and so for 3 days, often there was to be silence during those 3 days in school, and the preacher would preach in the forenoon and in the afternoon, and in between they would read the lives of the saints. And I myself was asked to do a retreat like that in another school in the diocese, and well, that's the way we had done it. So I went up there prepared, and I did preach for 3 days, and the rumblings that were going on in the audience with the students, and it was a disaster, really. And I was driving back from Flint to Battle Creek in Michigan. There I was assigned to Battle Creek late at night, and I said, boy, that was a failure. I really felt like I was a failure. I felt like I don't think I'm cut out to work with youth. I was going to just cancel myself out of that kind of ministry. But it occurred to me as I was driving there late at night that really the gospel, Jesus, is relevant for all times, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there's really nothing wrong with our young people. It's possibly the way we're doing this. There was a movement in the church at that time, the Cursillo movement it was called, which had predated this a lot, and it was for adults. And I had gone on one of those retreats. It started on a Thursday night and went through Sunday, and it was all for men and another weekend for women. So here were all these men, and we sat around tables. The truck driver, a lawyer, a doctor, and a college student, and me. And we were there for these days, and these men who had participated in that kind of retreat were giving the talks. And I'd never heard a lay person giving a spiritual talk. All through seminary, somebody with a collar like this was always up there, and it was so profound what they were saying and doing and living.
When I made my Cursillo following Father Matt's, it was such an awe-inspiring experience for me, because I had not heard lay people give such wonderful spiritual talks, and to see how they lived their life of love and sacrifice was very moving.
And the men in my parish who had made that retreat, they were the fathers. They said, we want our sons to make this retreat. And I said, well, that retreat's for adults. Then he said, well, we got to design something for them, for especially our high school boys.
But we had this empty nurses' home, and I've always felt that from scriptures that what we are given freely, we must give freely. So I started using the nurses' home for different people. Some sisters from Detroit wanted some weekends for their senior girls. When I saw the change, the transformation of those young ladies, seniors in high school, from Friday night to Sunday, I said, oh, this is tremendous. So I was talking about it, and I'm very enthusiastic, and so I'm telling all the priests about it. And so Father Matt gave one of the weekends, was the retreat master for a weekend. And then the Cursillo men wanted him to do something with his senior boys.
You know, if you read St. Paul, you really get into this. He says, we are always carrying about in our body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may also be manifested in our body. Well, since I was teaching high school students, I said, oh my gosh, I'm not teaching them the main message. Something has to be done to get this through to my main ministry. And I felt I couldn't do it in a classroom, and the retreats we were doing were failing. And so I said, maybe we have to devise a retreat.
So come the first weekend, and there wasn't anyone to coordinate the meal time, the conference room, the liturgies, set up the liturgies. And so I said, well, I'm a little more free on the weekends. So from Friday night to Sunday night, I started being over there doing this coordination.
Well, at the end of that first retreat, I was sitting there like, gee, I wonder if it worked, kind of like. So each boy had to get up and share, what had happened to him. And this one boy got up. Well, it's a simple retreat. Die, rise, and go. I said, oh my gosh, they got it. With Christ, of course. That was the Lent thing, die, Easter thing, rise, and Pentecost, go out and convince others of this message and of this way of life.
Then he came back so fired up, and they had the snow day. And
there was a snow day the next day, so there was no school. And these 25 boys kind of called each other, and they spent their snow day, and they went out with shovels, shoveling drive walks for shut-ins and convalescent homes, and the newspaper heard about that. What are these 25 boys going around Battle Creek shoveling walks? Who are they? So they got a picture of them and put the article on the front page of the paper the next day. And I knew then that we had a lion by the tail. There'd been a tremendous change in these kids, and I knew it was powerful.
And I look back and I think how much faith those priests and young people and team had in what we were saying.
Once you have experienced it, you don't even have to tell them to go out and share it. The kids just went out. and because they experienced this great thing, tell all their friends. Well, then, as Dorothy will speak later, we did one of those weekends, and then the kids were signing up, and we did a weekend every year, every weekend of the school year. And one kid said, well, it was like one day with 2 naps. And obviously, they stayed up late most nights because they wanted to. And so I said, again, that's meaningful because it's one experience. The dying and the rising, isn't like at separate times. In the very dying, you rise. It's kind of like the story of the phoenix. The phoenix dies, and out of the ashes comes. It's all one event. Out of the ashes comes a new creation. So those lines have stuck for 35 years. That's amazing. Die, rise, and go. We call it die day, rise day, and go day.
During the week, I went out to different cities for a forthcoming team to check in with them. So that became my full-time position for another couple of years. So in the first 3.5 years, I was on 105 weekends.
First of all, started with my own school. I wanted to do something better for my seniors. And then people heard about it, and then I realized that every Catholic high school was looking for a better retreat, and people started calling up from Grand Rapids and Saginaw, and pretty soon out of state, Cincinnati and Dubuque, Iowa, and Peoria, and
they'd call and say, we're hearing about this retreat. Can we have the manual? And we'd say, no, you have to come and experience it, and then you can buy the manual.
It's an experience, first of all. It's not a head thing. So bring your priest and bring some lay people, bring some students, participate in a weekend, and then we'll give you the book. And then perhaps you can go back and train an adult team. That was the first thing we told them.
I knew that somehow we had to get through that first year of the 27 scheduled weekends. So while I was administrator from Tuesday morning to Friday night. Then I was over at TEC from Friday night to Monday night. And if I got 10 hours sleep on the weekend, I was doing pretty well. Father Matt and Father Fitzgerald asked my superior if I could be released from hospital administration. Then the result was being able to move into TEC and to help Father Matt put his dream, his vision into a reality.
In the beginning, I wrote a manual at Loyola using, it wasn't my stuff. That's why I never put my name in the first manual, because I didn't think it was mine. It was the gospel. And all these teachers at Loyola were the ones who really gave it to me. And I felt this is a gift. What you receive is a gift, give as a gift.
For the first year, we had the schedule for 3 days on a page and a half. And then finally I would sit in on each weekend, and then I'd stretch the time, and I'd place this, and gradually through the year, I was able to put together the first lay director's manual in the summer of '66.
When it stopped after 5 years in our area, I thought, well, maybe it was a silly thing, that like many other things we tried. But it did good, I thought. It did good for 5 years. And we were in a thinking mode in the 60s of, things were changing all the time. It's the culture, and well, it's like the Beatles are gone and the new people come in. And I said, well, it did. And every group that's been there was good. The Beatles were good, but let's move on. So, well, TEC was good, but let's move on.
It is my joy to share with you some of my memories of how I became involved in TEC. The first thing I'd like to say is that I certainly did not intend to become as much involved in TEC as I did become eventually. God kind of tricked me, because in the beginning I was just looking for a good retreat for my boys at Boys Town. And searching around the country, someone told me that magic, wonderful movement called TEC. And so we decided to become involved.
Yes, I got this call from New York City in the late 70s that they were having a TEC convention. And I said, a TEC convention? What do you do at a TEC? And they described it, and they said, we want you to be the keynote speaker and come and tell us how this all started.
The National TEC Conference was really concerned about a number of things, and among them that we needed a manual. So one of the members volunteered to gather the manuals that were then in existence in the TEC movement in the United States, and to put them into one common manual to see if we could not have some guidelines at least. Well, as a result of this, we discovered that there were 13 different models, totally distinct models. Looking at one of the models and looking at another one, you can say this can't be the same movement. The interesting thing is that Greg Sweitz took all the models together and all the different talks that were given, and one of the things that we discovered that over a third of the models, the Paschal Mystery talk was dropped entirely. So it kind of showed that TEC had gone out of focus. And on the way home from that convention, I was talking with Greg Sweitz, and he said, well, then how do we do it if we don't gather all the manuals together? And I said, find 5 or 10 of the best movements in the United States, best models of TEC movement in the United States, and gather them together around a table and ask them to tell us what they feel is the essence of TEC, what's essential to TEC. We had one of the persons was from the Chicago movement, Mary Nyroy was there, Father Makovic was there from the Green Bay movement, and ourselves. And so we had a good sample, as it were, of the movement in different places. And the only thing we asked in that particular dialogue was, what are the essentials of TEC to you? And we really agreed on a lot more than we disagreed on. Well, Father Matt he keeps his documents very well through the years. And so he then sent back to me a letter saying, he said, it's interesting that 20 of the points that you say you agree on were the same 20 points that I said were essential to TEC when I started it. And finally, Mike Carroll, who is a priest of the Green Bay Diocese, got permission from Jim and Doris Madigan to use their summer home on Lake Kangaroo in Door County. And 8 of us went up there for one summer. It's interesting to note that the very first year we really didn't accomplish very much, except we became very close friends of one another. of friendship that's perdured even to this day. And that was the kind of the thrust we needed. The trust of one another is what the thrust we needed to go back to the movement and to discern what should be done about it. The first summer we really didn't come to any conclusions except that we're going to continue to meet. We decided that we would invite Father Fedewa to meet with us in Chicago.
He said, we want to have this TEC thing, but everybody I talk to has like a different version of it. And I finally found out that you're the person, Dorothy, who started this. I want to talk to you. Come to Chicago. We'll pay your way.
During that time, he spent 2 days with us and talked about exactly how he saw TEC unfolding, what it was trying to do, and what he had in mind when he put together originally.
He came, we met in Chicago, and he had his tape recorders, and I think I talked for 3 days. And he just took it all in, and he was really fascinated by how this was in the beginning.
We came to the conclusion that we could not work with the weekend itself, the TEC weekend itself, because we did not know enough in depth about the spiritual values that were involved in that. So we decided that we would work with the people who were handling TEC. The confusion came from a number of things. It was in a period of time after Vatican II when people were very excited about the church, but also sometimes went off like skyrockets because they really didn't understand fully well what the church was talking about in that council. And so they were handling TEC, and therefore they were bringing their own misconceptions many times into the process. Secondly, the word Paschal mystery was practically unknown. It was not, and if they did mention it, there was very little understanding about what it was all about. The third thing was that they were not trained in youth ministry. They didn't know the basic difference in adolescent psychology, for example, the difference between a young adolescent and one that's a mature adolescent for which TEC is designed. And finally, they also said, we need a follow-up. We need something to work with the youth to develop their faith life after TEC. And so that was the subject matter of our first workshop, which was held in Rome, Illinois, when it took place in August of 1984.
Father Brown and Sister Joy called and said, would you come to the 20th annual convention of TEC? And I said, the what? And so I said, wild horses won't keep me away from that. So I came, and Father Matt and I had not seen each other for 7 years, and we had occasionally talked, but neither one of us were aware that it was being organized, and all these centers. By that time, I think about 70 centers had started.
And I said, this is worthwhile. It's worth spending time to see if we can't recreate it. Now, in the beginning, I'd like to say that someone has compared this to working in the dark with a shattered vase, not knowing how the vase was put together, and little by little putting together one piece at a time. And then we gradually learned the design, because we really didn't know where we were going. And we were listening much. We were listening to everybody and trying to decide what was the original model.
Father Brown insisted that there's not much revised. It is that the original concepts were so strong, and that's how the manual starts. It starts with almost the original manual I wrote in '65.
TEC is not just a ritual on a weekend, but it really involves a community of faith community of adults, involve catechetical principles and education principles. It also involves persons who understand youth culture, because the movement enters very deep into youth culture. We kind of go in their door and they come out ours.
This is our original spiritual director, weekend manual, lay director manual. And now we have this manual, which is loose leaf binders so that there can be more and more pages put in.
The final joy in this long process, which really went through about 15 years, came to a conclusion when we were invited by Archbishop Schweitz to a private audience with the present Holy Father, Pope John Paul II. We met on Pentecost Sunday in front of St. Peter's. And following his Mass, he came over and we presented to him one of our TEC manuals. He said to me, how long have you been working with youth? And I said, a long time. And he said, how old are you? And I said, I'm a year younger than you are. And he said, let us pray for one another.
that to teach this way of life to youth for however long there is, because it's the gospel, and that this weekend, this retreat would continue doing that.
The person that changed my spiritual life was Father Matt. And how Father Brown brought me out into a new phase, and how all of the TEC leaders that I have met have been such an inspiration and strength. And I just feel so confident about TEC for the future, because it's lived this long, and I just know that it's God's work, and I'm grateful to be a part of it.
I mean, this priest did this for the first time, let a TEC, and he was scared all the way through, and that's what he wrote. So it's still changing lives, as recently as last week.
So I challenge all of you to go forth and live the Paschal Mystery and pass that experience on, because we need to give hope to this hopeless world, this dying world.